think we are good. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for being here on this sunny 6 o'clock p.m. special meeting now that we've changed our clocks. A special meeting of our Town Plan and Zoning Commission, which I'd like to call to order. Today is Monday, March 10th at 6 p.m. My name is Robert Klee. I'm the chair of our Woodbridge Town Planning and Zoning Commission. Other members who are with us here tonight include Kathy Hunter, Andrew Skolnick, Jeff Kennedy, and we might have Ben Cherry sometime soon, but we do have a quorum, so we can go ahead. Thank you, as always, Chris Sullivan, our land use analyst and zoning enforcement officer, for all your support. It's nice to be here in person. Nice to see all of you. Tonight's agenda was available on the town website for our special meeting, and the special meeting will be an opportunity for us to talk a bit about our plan of conservation and development and the process that we are undertaking to write that every 10-year document. And it's an opportunity for our consultant, SRLR International, to give us an update on what is going on in our plan of conservation and development writing process, with a specific focus today on our draft goals and strategies. So without further ado, or is there anything further to do, Chris, before? Okay. I'd like to hand it over, if you could just introduce yourself for the record and for the viewing audience.
Do I have to turn this on, or is it already on?
It should be
No,
the
I think
red
it's on.
light.
It's red? Oh, it doesn't have to turn to green?
No,
No.
it stays
Oh,
red.
okay. In other towns, I have to make it green in order to be heard.
Ben, good to see you as well.
Nice to meet you. Well, good evening, everyone. For the record, I'm Robert Collins with SLR, and I'm the project manager with our company that's assisting the town with the update to the plan of conservation and development. My main focus tonight is to give you a preview and update you on the process that has been being undertaken over the last couple months. And, you know, since we last spoke, when we had kind of confirmed the vision statement, we then went into the process of starting to come up with goals and strategies and then ultimately action steps. And the main focus tonight is to give you a preview of that, update you on all the process that has happened, and then to kind of loop you back into the process, because obviously your input now is of the most important, but we hope that we've laid a lot of groundwork and have supplied you with a lot of information to help you with your review. So I'm going to go give an overview of the process that got us to this point. I'm going to kind of go through what is a goal, strategy, and action item, and then I'm going to give an overview of the goals and strategies, which is a document that Chris did forward to you on Friday, and you might have gotten that in your email, although we have made a couple of adjustments already since then, and then give you a quick preview of the document that is subsequent to that actually adds action items into it. And then I want to end by just kind of talking about next steps, determine like your time frame, and then if we may need to have a workshop or something like that, and then talk about then ultimately looping in the public back in to review the goals, strategies, and action steps. Okay, so that's the quick preview. Okay, so right off the bat, I want to give a big thank you to Chris for all of her assistance in helping us, coordinate with all of the various boards, commissions, and committees, as well as department staff. Over the last month and a half, or actually 2 months full, we've had a lot of engagement. I know that the first selectman also, through his email communication with departments and commissions and boards, also, put out the word to try to get their involvement. And I would say that we had a very robust involvement, and I'm very thankful for that effort that the town, committee members and all, and residents that are on these various boards and commissions went through that process, as well as the department staff. So prior to mid-January of this past year, that was when the first selectman, and I think through Chris's help as well, they did put out the word going back into the fall to the various commissions, board, and committees to ask them to review the existing POCD and to kind of consider suggested updates that are from their perspective and kind of be prepared to share them with us. In addition, it was important for them to also supply information on any initiatives or directives or plans or things like that that might be of value for us all to consider in updating the POCD. They were asked to supply that in written format, and then once that was received in mid-January, every single board did and commission did submit something, so we had a lot to look at. We then, in late January, again with Chris's help, we set up what we called roundtable discussion meetings. And what we did is we gave each one of the boards and commissions as well as town staff the opportunity to come in and review what they had supplied or what they had looked at, or if they hadn't yet, to give us the opportunity to have a dialogue back and forth. On January 27th, we met with the Woodbridge School District as well as the Amity Regional School District. We met with the Department of Public Works, Finance, Human Services, Recreation, the Conservation Commission, and the Economic Development Commission, as well as staff. And then that was followed up on another day, a week later on February 5th, where we met with the Commission on the Use of Publicly Owned Property, the Sustainability Committee, the Housing Committee, and then we also roped the first selectman into the process as well and started getting some of the town administration kind of point of view. We also had, through Chris, email communications from the library. We didn't meet with them directly, but we received some edits and some suggestions from them. Also from fire, police, and then the 2030 task force. I believe we also, the Culture and Community Center, Chris, that's a separate person, right? So
Yes.
we received communication from them as well.
Yes.
Okay, so that's where we were by the early part of February. We then, in mid-February, we started going through all the information in a lot of detail. The other thing I forgot to mention too that that was happening in January, as myself and my team at SLR, we actually went through the existing POCD, and we did align all of the existing action steps and policies and goals with the new theme areas, so that we could start to identify what we saw as some of those strategies, or I should say first goals and then strategies. So we did that first, and we also shared that with some of the committees and town staff as maybe appropriate, just to kind of remind them or show them where things were potentially going to be moving to. So we had done that and shared that at the roundtable meetings. So in February, once we had those discussions, we started to kind of fine tune. We started to more clearly identify the new goals and strategies, and we started to identify some of the initial action items. We then also had communication with the Regional Water Authority and the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Authority, because we needed to talk with them about the existing water and sewer. We're still waiting for some information from them, but they have been, in contact and have been supplying. But, by the time we get to the end of the process, we will have full information from them. And then SLR, along with town staff, we also further reviewed each existing action item, because we went through every single action item and determined whether it was something that clearly should move forward, maybe move forward with some amendments or adjustments or suggestions, or if it was something that was complete and was no longer needed. I mean, there were some grants and some construction type of things that didn't move forward because they were completed or the directive had kind of changed. And so that brings us up to where we are today, and this is where we now, want to loop you back into the process. We have a wealth of information that we have gathered for you, and what we're wanting to do is just give you a preview of the documents that are in front of you. Chris and I did print out 3 documents to help you with your review, which includes the vision statement. Which does include the vision statement, as well as a document that just has the goals and strategies. And we do encourage you, and we will talk about this separately, but I do encourage you to look at the, if you haven't already, that document that Chris sent you. I do encourage you to look and feel comfortable with the goals and strategies before you start to look at the potential action items, which is included in the third document. And I will pull those documents up, and I will ask you if you have any questions to try to make sure that you feel comfortable with what you're going to be reviewing in more detail. Before we do that, though, I just wanted to clarify what is a goal, a strategy, and an action. So from our perspective, and what we're suggesting to you, is that a goal is a broad statement that supports the theme area. And the theme areas, there's 3 theme areas that we identified that are coming out of the overall community vision statement for the plan. And then underneath each goal, there's a series of strategies that are more specific subject statements to support that goal. They may, in some cases, sound very similar, but they might be more specific. And then lastly, an action item is a very specific action step or policy to support that strategy. And I will, so for example, a goal might be pursue targeted economic development. That's very broad subject, which could have a lot of different things underneath of it. A strategy might be the various individual subjects underneath of that, and one of them is build a strong business community. And then underneath that, the action item would, one of the several action items is establish a business retention program with the business community. Now, let me just get out of this document real quick. I wanted to just open up, this is the existing action agenda of the existing plan. And this is at the very end. This is all compiled as a kind of like a implementation table. But each one of these things, if as in the up in the text part or the individual chapter part of the existing POCD, they're kind of each page where these goals and actions that come up, or it's called an action plan. And so what we found, though, in looking at a lot of them, is that there wasn't anything previously called a strategy. But when we reviewed this and we looked at the goals, for the most part, we found that a lot of the existing goals were really more strategies and that they needed to be under a broader heading. And so that's why we kind of collapsed them into the, and especially since we were going with the 3 theme areas, that we wanted to make sure that we had the broad goals and then had strategies, which for the most part are almost like some of the goals of the existing plan. And then a lot of the actions are what we're now calling action items. And some of those action items might be direct projects or tasks, or they could be a policy that might direct you on approving or reviewing a development application, for instance. And also when talking with the first selectman, this was also something because he likes the action plans and he likes the idea of an implementation table, and then being able to very clearly see what the potential action items are for the next 10 years. One thing that we also have done so far, and we can adjust that, is that we've already tried to integrate a clear numbering system so that you can very clearly identify a goal or strategy and action. That was something that was missing in the existing plan, and it does cause some confusion, and you aren't able to very clearly cite something, or if you wanted to move something up for an action item to be funded, say in the CIP, it's much easier to say, please consider funding for action item 1.1.4A type of a thing. If you have a particular feeling that you'd rather have all numbers as opposed to some numbers and some letters, we're open to that, but we right now, you'll see that in the document where we've kind of proposed an initial numbering system for each theme and then for each goal and for each strategy, and then that's followed by a lettering system for the actual action items. Sure.
Thank you, and that actually is helpful to sort of understand that sort of process overview. I do really appreciate the look back at our last POCD, what was in there, and how this is an evolution of that document going forward. So I think that makes a ton of sense. The one thing that came to mind is that in these last 10 years, the state plan of correct me if I'm wrong, the state plan of conservation development has been updated since our last plan of conservation development. Yes.
Almost. It has not been officially adopted yet, but it's very far along. I mean, we're fully aware of the way that it's being set up, and so we have,
That was my main
yeah.
question. So go with that on how are we just making, because we have
Yeah.
to align with it, or when it ever comes out.
Right,
Just
and-
how we're doing that to make sure that things we're in concert, or we speak
Right.
to that document as well.
It is going to be it's a little bit different this time around, and we are going to make the assumption that it has been adopted with this adoption, because it could almost happen simultaneously. But the way, in our conversations with the OPM staff, and our understanding is that the plan does set out some specific objectives. In the past, there were like 6 development or principles, I think they called them, planning principles that you had to kind of align with. Those planning principles are actually in the state statute. And so now what the state wants you to say is that you're meeting those state statutes, but you're following guidance that's in the plan. And I think we will be well aligned, because I don't think there's any surprises in those development or those principles that they have. Sustainable and development and conservation. So I know that will be pretty well aligned. I mean, we have to be aligned with the regional plan of conservation and development too. And one of the things that we'll have in our consistency chapter, which will be the last chapter of the document, is we'll actually identify those various things from those 2 plans, and we'll actually identify the goal, the strategy, or the action item that is consistent, so that it's very clear.
I just have a question, because you talked about a numbering system with the action items. Is that the same numbering system that the Board of Selectmen uses for their strategic plan, or is that a different numbering system?
No, I mean, it's somewhat similar, but the strategic plan actually has something that's called, I think it's like the action items are called, is it tactic, I think? It's an unusual word. I think it's a tactic. And the strategic plan is also evolving according to the first selectman. I mean, I think a lot of the things in there are okay, but it's just the format and how they focus on them. And that's one of the things that he said to me, and he'll probably be telling that to you all too as we get through and into adoption, is that he actually wants to use the implementation table as almost like as a substitute to the strategic
Okay.
plan in some cases.
Thanks.
Sure. Okay, so if we, just to go back, so that is just the connection with the existing plan. And I kind of went through the examples of a goal, a strategy, and action steps. So now if we just take a look at the handouts that, the 3 handouts that you have, obviously the first one, and this is just for your re-reference, is the draft vision statement, so that you can just be reminded of that. We just thought, while you may have a copy of this or are electronic, we just thought it would be helpful to have that in front of you as well. And also, just so I don't forget, all the documents that we gave you as a handout tonight, we can give to you as, Word documents or PDF. We can talk about that at the very end, and then Chris can forward them to you. So then if we go to then the next document, which is similar to, and this is really important that I feel that you review this document next, which is the document that Chris forwarded to you on Friday. We have made a couple of minor edits, and this came from like late Friday discussions. I actually need to click on that. So for theme area 1, I can sit back down again. This is the one where the theme area is pursuing responsible growth and housing diversity. So we've identified 5 goals for this section, which include facilitate sustainable growth, which is goal 1.1, and then 1.2 is pursue targeted economic development. Goal 3 is increased housing options and affordability. Goal 4 is maintain quality community infrastructure systems. And goal 5 is maintain and enhance transportation systems with pedestrian and bicycle considerations. Now, You know, we have these in a particular order, but again, as part of your review, if you would like to make some adjustment to the wording within that goal, I mean, that's what we want to try to get from, you know, your opinions about that. They can also we can move them around too. Like if you'd rather have goal number 4 be the first, we can certainly do that. We've tried to lay it out in a way that we kind of flows with the language within the theme area. And we did think that at a minimum, facilitate sustainable growth should probably be the first one, because that's going to be like your main, the things for the TPZ that are probably going to be like mostly in your court. So we thought that that was clearly important to be first. Housing or economic development, it just kind of flowed that way, but they could switch if you wanted housing to become the second goal. Anyway, I don't want to get bogged down in some of those details, but just wanted to let you know that. And then, you know, underneath each goal, we have between 1 to 5 various strategies that are more specific subjects. So you know, like as I already mentioned, I think it's important to kind of review these first to kind of get comfortable with whether you think that we have all the goals and we have all the strategies. And then once you have that, you know, or made some adjustments, or you've read through the whole document, then that's where you might then start to take a look at the last document, which actually adds action items to the various strategies. And again, some of the strategies, action items that you'll look at will start to, some of them might sound familiar to you because they might be things that are pulled forward from the existing POCD, or they might be things that, you know, that you're already aware of, that we captured from our conversations with other town staff. I guess I should just go through the goals for each one of the theme areas. So the second theme area is embracing sustainability and resilience. And there's 4 goals here, and each goal has between 2 to 5 strategies. And the first one is embrace environmental sustainability and conservation. The second one is promote social sustainability and equity. The third is enhance local climate resilience and emergency management capacity, and support and expand clean energy and conservation efforts. And then the third theme area was promoting a welcoming community. And this one has 4 goals with various strategies. The first goal is foster community spirit, civic engagement, and regional collaboration. Goal 2 there is provide community services, facilities, and amenities. And then the third goal is embrace and preserve natural spaces. And then the fourth one is maintain and enhance historic and cultural resources. As I mentioned, we did make a couple of edits. So the document that you now have in front of you shows that redlining. So, you know, please use that document to start off with any of your reviews, as opposed to the document that Chris sent on Friday. Any initial questions or clarification needs for any of the theme areas and the goals and the strategies?
So I'll start by saying I do like how the paragraph that we worked on is the starting point for the ordering and the logical sort of step-by-step of the goals. That does have some just structurally that makes sense.
Like structurally flowing.
Yeah. No, and I can see how this is all designed to have these sort of tiers of specificity as you sort of drill down into the ultimate action that you're going to take under the broad theme. Each of the multiple goals, which is about 4 goals roughly for each, with multiple strategies, which then will have action items. So that all makes good sense. I had a few just quick things from reviewing the old version, but now the new version. I think on goal 1.4 on community infrastructure, and now with the new language, it's maintaining public water system, maintaining the public sewer system, and assist with private septic systems. I'm curious, for the water systems, for parallelism, do we want to have something to reflect that so much of our town has private well systems? I don't know exactly what the right sort of role of that is in a plan of conservation and development, but maybe you have experience with other towns like ours that are very reliant on wells, like what should be potential goals in that space. But I know so many people have them, they occasionally run
Right.
dry. They're,
That might be like, I know that this was in our conversations with Krista, she might have a suggestion, because the reason why we had assist with just under, with the septic system is because that during a building permit process, you know, the town is involved because you have to, there's coordination with the Department of Health. What about with private wells? Is there like something in a building permit where the well has to be reviewed?
When Quinnipiac Valley reviews a permit, they're reviewing both a well and the septic location in terms of the use and the proximity of, say, an addition or a new structure to that. So,
Okay, so
yeah.
then it probably would make sense to say.
It would make sense
them
to add it
similar.
in.
So
Yeah.
we could say, and under the first one, it could say, and assist with private well water systems.
Yeah.
and then the other little thing I had was in theme area 2, goal 2.4 on clean energy and conservation. I guess a question on the edit, the removal of within town, was that just because it's redundant, or was there more to it than that?
No, I mean, I thought, in looking, I mean, the town is mentioned a couple times in a couple of the strategies, but then I thought that, you know, when promoting energy conservation, it might, in some of the stuff that you may do, it may go beyond, it might be more like regional collaboration or something like that.
Yeah.
So I thought that it, you know, the action step will probably clarify if it's, and all, obviously, the responsible entity would clarify that, but I thought it would probably, it wasn't needed. It was kind of like redundant language.
No, I actually like that, and that recognition that for some of these systems, we occasionally do that in concert with others in the region
Right.
as well. And then last little edit for me on 2.4.4, promote recycling and explore sustainable waste management reduction. I think reduction's is not needed. I think you just want to promote sustainable waste management. It would be, waste reduction is something you could promote, but sustainable waste management is a broader umbrella term that would encompass both reduction but also avoidance of making waste, or, you know, the diversion from waste or other sorts of things.
Right.
So reduction, I don't know if it's needed.
Okay, I mean, I know, I mean, that's totally fine, that might be implied under sustainable, it's just, that is a big buzzword with like the COGS and the state, that they're trying to really, you know, reduce or eliminate waste as much as possible. But I think in some of the action steps, that might come out, and maybe that can all be seen as sustainable, because.
Sustainable waste management would cover under the action steps reduction of this and
Right,
diversion of that.
right,
and-
so maybe it is
yeah.
redundant in the strategy itself. Okay,
I don't feel super strong about it. So if it is a buzzword that others like using, I'm okay using it. Others with comments, suggestions, edits. I know this, Robert, we also can have things tonight, but we can also get you additional things after tonight. Right?
definitely.
I liked it. I thought this was a good approach. It was helpful. The change you made in strategy 1.4.1, striking your word provide and putting maintain, was something I had taken a look at, because I thought the word provide might have been a little bit ambitious but, for a town-wide level. But I like how you did that. So
Okay.
I think it's good.
I just had a couple of suggestions. Just looking at strategy, just the first one, strategy 1.1.1. Just a thought when you talk about guide future growth to be consistent with existing land use patterns, environmental protection. and infrastructure capabilities. You know, in terms of guiding future growth, I thought perhaps also to add in, and the needs of residents in the region the town belongs to. Because I feel like the needs of the residents is something that would be guiding future growth as well as these other items.
I mean, maybe that can be like embedded into like an action step, because, but, I mean, I guess it's up to the rest of the commission.
Yeah, I think that is I'm not gonna say problem. The action steps seems to clarify some of these goals. So when I was looking at some of these goals, I thought they were totally redundant. But when you look at the action steps, then you could see how they are different. So I think it is important to read, now that we have this document, to read it in concert with the action steps. But so maybe it comes clear when we start
Right.
looking at the action steps. The other,
Actually, before we move off of that, Kathy, if you don't mind, so Robert, I think she's maybe pointing to that theme area says in the first line, we have a future with innovative, sustainable growth that aligns with community and regional needs. So could that even be in goal 1.1, facilitate sustainable growth that aligns with community and regional needs? Like bring it even up a level, like into that, this is the 1 point, I don't know.
I mean, maybe that becomes a second strategy, more specifics about, I mean, I know that regional collaboration comes up in a later theme area as well.
But we are growing sustainably for a purpose, which is to meet the needs of our community and the region in which we sit.
Right.
Which I think, and you should definitely correct me if I'm wrong, that was in the theme but didn't quite make it into the goals, at least explicitly.
Okay. Well, again, you know, my main goal tonight is just to like preview it all with you. And so, and we are obviously getting some edits, but, you know, we're hopeful that, you know, you'll, you know, supply additional edits. I mean, we're not only looking at it tonight for your edits. I'm assuming that it might, you know, take like a week or more to get all of your edits, and then maybe we can come back together. And after you've thought about it, maybe, like I said, there might be a need for like maybe an additional strategy, because, you know, that's the most important thing that I mentioned to Chris earlier, is that, you know, we've supplied these with you, but now this is really where we all have to really crunch them to make sure that they're meeting your goals and your needs and your desires, especially from as a TPZ. You know, and if you lay that out, you know, maybe again, like maybe in a work session or something like that, maybe we can workshop that, you know, once we kind of know that that's something that we want to add or follow up on or something like that.
If I could suggest as a guiding principle, where possible, I would like to see some of the language massaged in a way that makes it a little bit more specific. So I'm looking specifically at goal 3.3. The first strategy says, create a meaningful overall open space system. I think there's a lot of room for interpretation there, and I think differences in interpretation start to be where people in town feel at odds with one another, potentially. I'm not sure what create a meaningful overall open space system means. I think it could become clear when the action items are sort of enumerated, but to the extent that a strategy is sort of evident, I think that would be, I think that would be a guiding principle that I would sort of support or promote. And there are a few places, I mean, you know, there are going to be words where people just don't exactly interpret them the same way. So provide a safe and convenient road network under 1.5. People may have different ideas about the word convenient. And so I don't take too much umbrage with that. But the word meaningful is just, I think it's a little bit too open to interpretation to really guide that specific strategy. That would just be my feedback.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, those are the kind of things that we're hoping that you do all consider, and that, you know, we do get some, you know, thoughtful or meaningful comments back. I know that in that particular one, a lot of this came from existing POCD and then work with the Conservation Commission, obviously, and the stuff that they gave us. They kind of laid out a pretty clear, work program that they have. And it was, what I did is I tried to break it up, rather than lumping it all into just one strategy. What I saw and what they provide is that they did kind of talk about an overall strategy, and there are at least 4 or 5 action items under that, so that might help clarify that, and maybe it might even clarify a word change. But there did seem to be an overarching open space, then the specific guidance that the open space plan gives, how to manage that and that open space, and also maybe provide recreation, how to acquire more open space, and then how to enhance just the overall preservation efforts of open space. The conservation is part of the POCD, but it is, it is wrapped in that conservation and development balance. But again, I think, maybe the action items will help to clarify that a little bit more, but they also might point to an adjustment of a word. And I know that, Chris and I have, worked on this now for, quite a few weeks, and so we know a lot of where this came from and why, and we're totally open to sharing that with you, but also open to you, the suggestions that you have. And I realize that, you've only looked at this, either tonight or starting over the weekend, and so we definitely want to make sure you have more time to consider, and then also to take in all of the initial action items that have been laid out as well.
I did have one more tweak with the strategy 1.33. You have explore ways to improve housing affordability and affordable housing. I just think that needs to be a little bit more action-oriented, more provide ways to improve housing affordability and affordable housing. I actually thought perhaps to say implement the affordable housing plan to promote affordable housing, but then I see you have that as part of the action, so I think it really needs I think you do need to look at the goals in concert with the actions for them to become clear, because when I first started even looking at the pursuing targeted economic development, I thought a lot of those strategies were completely redundant, and that's why I think it's probably I need to go and look at the actions to see how those different strategies
Right.
are clarified.
Yeah, no, I mean, choosing those words very carefully, and, again, these were our initial suggestions, and we're open to, obviously, to your suggestions, and then for the group consensus on what the actual word might be.
Yeah, I mean, to Jeff's earlier point, the word provide is really a
Stronger word than-
conclusive kind of word. I think it might be too strong in that context, Kathy, only because a lot of ways to improve housing affordability and affordable housing, to my limited understanding, have to do with tapping into resources that exist through other entities. So providing those resources may not necessarily be something the town is able to do, but I certainly would support a word change. Provide is just quite strong.
I thought perhaps just to say implement the affordable housing plan to promote affordable housing. So there it's, we got promote as opposed to provide, because there is another strategy that references implementing a report. But then I think we have to look to see how you wrote up the actions to see
Yeah, I
whether or
would
not.
definitely encourage that to be an action item rather than because I think that there might be ultimately over the next 10 years, there might be ways other than the affordable housing plan that might be pursued. And I think you might see that within the, some of the actions items, because there's things like zoning changes, maybe stuff with nonprofit communities and things like that. So I definitely think there's room for you all to decide which word might be best there, but I would just encourage not putting the affordable housing plan as a strategy, but having that as a action item.
Right.
But again, ultimately, I'm just here
Robert,
to
just to
guide
put
you.
an asterisk here, it's a good time to maybe interrupt. This is all coming to us electronically, right? So these 3 documents will be mailed out to us, right, electronically?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Like, because we got this one on, over the weekend or Friday or something, so we have that.
Right.
So then these 3, you can send them to us, right?
Right, and you're gonna
Definitely.
discard the one that I sent you on Friday, because that's been updated by the one that you're seeing tonight.
Yes, yeah, okay, thank you, Chris, yeah.
So obviously, the third document that you have is the, that takes those items and then it turns it into, it adds the action items. Now, when you look at this document, there are, I think every single action is, obviously, worthy of your intense review and adjustment or ask questions, because we can also supply information on where it come from. You probably will recognize some of them that have been carried forward. Others you might be very clear on, where you think that they came from, but we're happy to discuss that. Now, on the side of this document, there are, on the right side of the document, there are some specifically called out questions. At a minimum, these are questions that myself and, town staff have specifically for you to consider, or they might just be to let you know that something is still pending. Especially, like, for instance, in the stuff that's related to the CIP, related to road improvement projects, as well as some of the projects for some of the town facilities and parks. We're still, we've kind of put placeholders in there, and then a lot of this is in both the transportation section of theme 1 and then the theme area 3, the one that has to do with town facilities and services. We are, probably going to massage some of those to make sure that we're capturing any grants or funding sources that the town staff might need. But I think we have a parking place for each one of the different facilities and things like that, especially with the information that we got from the commission on publicly used property. They had a lot of information in there about, their investigation of all the different property and how it's going to be used. And there's some things in there, too, about possibility for affordable housing options. So I think you might find it, without a doubt, I think you'll find it very interesting. There are comments and questions there for you, but, don't hesitate to ask or put your questions in there for each one.
Just a quick, so interesting, and again, lots of good stuff for us to digest and mull over. It brings up something you mentioned earlier from our action items list from our 10-year-old now plan of conservation development. Had a bunch of things that were do this specific thing that was 10 years ago that none of us remember or recall. Is there a risk of having too many of those sorts of, hey, let's focus in on this very of the moment thing versus things that'll have a longer shelf life in a plan like this, just strategically thinking.
I'm not 100% sure I'm following you. I think you want to have a range. I think you want to have.
Because you mentioned there were a few, do this plan or apply for this grant that you didn't carry forward because it was something 10 years ago from the first plan of conservation development. So yeah, they did it or they didn't do it, and it's 10 years.
Right.
Hence, and that's not an action item from the last one that anyone would do because that program doesn't exist anymore.
Right. I think, when this plan gets adopted, it is based on our viewpoint of where we are now. And there are some things especially connecting with capital improvement projects or building improvements that we know are in the short term or medium term where we know that the town administration is wanting or needing to go after a grant or funding. And so we know we want to put that in there. There might be something related to a parks, they didn't suggest this, but I'll just say, say there was a parks master plan that was desired to be funded, and the parks director had said, I need it in the POCD so I can try to get it onto the
Agenda for funding.
for funding. But then in other ways, there's some things in here that are tried to be, and I think a lot of your existing POCD, for the most part, in many cases, is more generalized so that it can last, because it is supposed to be, the most important thing with the POCD is to be guiding principles that are guiding you as the TPC in your evaluation of projects and applications and things like that that come before you, as well as to give some guidance to the zoning ordinance on how that, or regulations on how that might be able to be updated. It's also very crucial for like concurrency management type of thing, so that you can continue to maintain the services that you provide that, you know, allow for the development that's all, or the existing development and possible future development in the community. So in some cases, some of the strategies might be more broad so that they can have that 10-year shelf life. We try to do that with some grants and some funding, not knowing what might come up. If something really urgent does come up, the POCD could also always be amended if needed. Also, there was one other thing I haven't mentioned yet, is the country club property. You're probably curious about that. You know, right, as you know, that process is still ongoing. And so right now, we only have one discussion item, and it's actually in strategy 1.1.1, and it just talks about continuing to develop the plan. Because that is ongoing, and through our process of getting feedback from you as well as the public, it's possible that we may have some more specifics before the plan is adopted, if that final plan recommendation is adopted or something like that, we could adjust it. But we did try to trend fairly lightly based on like what is known today in our conversations with the first selectman, as well as the Economic Development Commission, as well as the Conservation Commission. But those, you know, so initially, for what we've laid out to you initially, we've trended that kind of higher level for that recommendation. I'm trying to think if there's any other, I know that there's also like the connectivity and
Right.
you know, we did try to be consistent with our wording. You know, the Economic Development Commission did make a recommendation that we continue to call the business district as opposed to Amity or the Flats, because that's kind of what they're targeting. And the business district is also, in talking with Chris, we're very clear now also with the Economic Development Commission in what that encompasses, which zoning categories it encompasses. And, you know, the very final piece of this plan, after we kind of concur with the goals, the strategies, and the action steps, and that the last piece of the document is the future land use plan. And the future land use plan, for the most part, will probably trend very closely to the existing zoning regulations, but then maybe identify opportunity areas or focus areas or whatever you all as a commission would prefer those areas to be. And it's highly likely that the business district and others that may be identified by you might be those like focus areas.
So the preference is to call that section of Woodbridge the business district.
That's correct.
There's so much more going on down there, though. I mean, we have residential, we have business development and stuff. Can you speak to that, Kathy, at all? Like, people want to call it the business district, I guess? They don't want a larger name?
To tell you the truth, a lot of people who live around the area want it to be known as the Flats, and they're proud of the name the Flats.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point, the business district, because I'm not really clear what the 2030 strategy is. I try to get some direction, but it doesn't seem like they're not even thinking about housing down there as of yet. They're still thinking about, you know, the connectivity and the sidewalks, and I don't understand really the approach as to why they're not considering the housing aspect as well. So I guess that's a long way of saying I'm not really sure what's going on down there and what the preference is, because there's, you know, the folks that live there certainly have an opinion as to what should
Which is
be-
what I would be
right.
deferring to mostly in that language. But business district is fine if that's what people want.
When they discussed it, they were actually discussing the business districts that are down there, and they really weren't encompassing
Right.
the residential districts. They were identifying the specific commercial business districts and what to call it.
Sure.
And that's where that name was, because that's what the EDC is involved with. Which is not to say that they're not looking for some form of residential that's in there, because there's already residential uses that are, in there. One other thing that we did notice when we were having the roundtables is that many of the boards and commissions are already, or refer back to the plans and goals within the POCD from 2015. So we found it interesting that they were pulling from there, whether they recognized that they were pulling it from there or not, but they were definitely things that were set forth in the POCD. So it's current in a sense.
I mean, I think within the business district itself, when you read that, you will see that there is action items that do refer to different types of potential housing. I know that in the business district, I know that the Human Services Department gave us some. I think the Economic Development Commission gave us some. There is the placemaking study that's being implemented as well by them, and I think that kind of gives some guidance on that subject as well. And the placemaking study is mentioned about continuing to implement its
And they were doing
guidance.
Main Street study as well, weren't they?
I think so. I don't know if that's been officially decided yet, so that's not officially mentioned, but I know that there's some consideration of that.
So I'm looking at the clock and I want to make sure we have some good homework to do, and Chris is going to send us these for everyone who couldn't be here tonight. And perhaps we should talk about the timeline, the next steps, kind of where we're going. Oh, and you have a slide for that. Wonderful.
Yep. So that's exactly what I was going to say. So, how long initially would you all like to take in reviewing them on, by yourself and supplying some comments? And then, do you, and I imagine that this might be the situation, because there might be a variety of different edits that we get and trying to balance them. Do you think after you've had a chance to review them, there's one of two ways that we could go. We could, either collect them from you in a couple weeks from now, or a week or 10 days. Or we could maybe collect them, but then maybe come back together in like a workshop type of situation and try to, workshop them. Or do we want to see like what kind of comments we get and see if we need to do something like that?
I think see what you get, and so we will all provide our comments to Chris, and then Chris will compile them.
And
get
then
them to you.
we'll talk.
And if you
yes.
see that maybe there are 3 areas where it looks like you have a diversity of sort of views that we need to come together and talk about.
It could also be from just wanting to get the perspective of like where this came from, or why is this in here, or I have more ideas. I know that we did, when it comes to stuff for the zoning regulations, without a doubt, we do have that question in there for you to consider, what type of zoning recommendations might you be looking for the next 10 years, or in short-term, long-term. And maybe that's, we could even just make it something, rather than workshopping or needing to workshop the whole thing, maybe it's just one specific item or one specific area, maybe housing or, zoning types of things. So, we're open and flexible to whatever your needs are.
So does a week work, or do you want 10 days? But we're not giving out too much more beyond that.
A week is fine for me, but I can't speak for other people. I'll be back in a week after I look at this.
A week to get you our
Initial
red
comments,
line and
yeah.
comments. That
And
sounds-
then that way that gives them time to.
Yep.
There would
crunch.
still be time to massage them further after that, but just at least you've had your initial, thinking.
Yes, let's try for a week.
Okay.
Now, in terms of providing comments, do we copy everybody so everybody sees what our comments are, or are we just forwarding
I don't think you
comments?
can do that.
No, I think
Just send
what
it
you
to
can
Chris.
do is send it to me. Do you want it as a track change and have them initial it, so we know who they came from?
Yeah, that might be helpful. If you're comfortable with that. Are you comfortable with doing track changes?
Sure.
Yeah, and I think if the email, and we'll know who they came from, so that's fine. But I think track changes would be very crucial.
And part of the reason why they have to all go to Chris is that we can't have
Right.
a ongoing communication and emails, talking to one another where we're not here.
And see other comments until we come back together as a full group. Also, just to, to what's a little bit further down the path is that once we come back, we get your comments, and depending on exactly what we have to do, once you feel pretty comfortable that you feel that they're in a draft format, the next step would be for us to then schedule and plan for the next community open house, and make sure that we would, at that event, which could be as early as the end of this month or at the very beginning of April, where we would share the overall vision statement. We could also, at that point, also put it onto the website, but we would want to have an interactive event with the public so that they could ask questions, see what the vision statement is, see what the goals and strategies are, and then have an active opportunity to make additional suggestions or edits to some of the action steps. And that's, we can follow up with some of the boards, commissions, and committees, but we also hope that they would come to that event as well and clarify whether we got their directives appropriately down. In some cases, we did modify some of the recommendations. We tried to make them a little bit more broad, so there were some adjustments, but some of them we were able to use exactly as they presented to us.
That all makes sense. So timing-wise, aiming for early April.
I mean, I think at the hopefully, yeah. Probably at the earliest.
Yeah. There's not a lot of March left after the week, which we
That's true.
do that.
Okay, so,
Robert,
'Cause we-
just a refresher on the final timing of the project. How are we along with that? So we do all of this. and
We're going to
then
be slightly late.
we get a draft in. Like, when does this go? This has to go to the Board of Selectmen for review, right? And then comes back here. We
Right,
vote on it?
yes. So once we go to the public and we get any of their final edits, we've already been in the process of drafting like the other sections of the plan. What we would want to do is after we have that public event, we would then come back together with you, a little bit later in April and share the full document with you so that you can, but there shouldn't be too many surprises like in the beginning of the document, because it's going to be summarizing the survey and the community profile and things like that. And then you already will be familiar with the theme areas, the vision statement, and the goals and strategies. So we're hoping that your review of that document can go pretty quickly. And then once you make the determination that you think that it's substantially ready for the review, it goes into that 65-day review period. And I think what we're hoping is that, that is probably the stage that we'll be in when the actual mid-May date comes up, or when your plan technically becomes expired. But we've already had some conversations with the state on that, and they're very understanding, especially if we're that far along and it's just in the 65-day review period. The only penalties that you potentially would have would be like some kind of grant hold up, but they know that you're far along, and we don't want to necessarily overly rush the process just to try to get that data, and we're not aware of any grants, so I think we're in good shape still.
Thank you.
We're beyond the time that I allocated for this meeting. Do you need me? Okay, all right. Take off. Thank you very
Thanks
much.
for
Thank
coming,
you,
Ben.
Robert. Thank you.
Sure,
Thank
thank you.
Ben.
We'll look forward to your comments.
you're welcome. Oops.
Any other last questions, thoughts, understanding of what homework we have? And Chris, you'll be sure to send it out to the
Yep.
entire
Yep.
group.
You will get it tomorrow.
Great.
Okay, great. Well, thanks a lot. It was nice
Thank
seeing
you.
all.
Thank you very
And
much.
we'll look forward to our hard work that we have lying ahead of us.
So I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Moved and second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? Right. Thank you again.